What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick.
I'm Jammin John.
And we have an album review for you and a nice little underground nugget to kind of close out this week of reviews. We are going to go over the debut full-length from Blighted Eye, Agony's Bespoke. This comes out also on the 20th of September on Beyond the Top Records. This band formed in 2019 in Seattle, Washington. This is their debut full-length. They have one other EP simply called Wretched. It came out in 2020. I haven't heard it. So this is like legit my first experience with this band, even though there's definitely an air of familiarity to this band's style. This is progressive death metal. It actually features a couple of members of the band Aethereus, and he's the one that turned me on to these guys.
Yeah, so back in 2022, remember when we were booking the Denver Death Fest, I reached out to Aethereus because I wanted them to play Denver Death Fest. And Kyle Chapman from Aethereus, who is also in Blighted Eye, reached out to me and we talked for a long time, and he mentioned that if Aethereus couldn't play, he wanted Blighted Eye to play, and I had never heard Blighted Eye, of course. And so he sent me some material and it was cool. And then a couple months ago, he reached out to me and said, "Hey man, got a new record coming out, you want to check it out?" And I said, "Sure."
And as I said, this is my first experience with them. This was, the first time I had actually heard this band style, but I did say that there's an air of familiarity because listening to this album, there's a lot of like similar tropes with, a lot of pretty well-known bands. One band in particular, there's a lot of OPETH vibes in here. In fact, this album sounds like the cover of My Armchair Hearse Looks. Yeah.
That's fair.
It is very gloomy, lots of atmosphere, proggy, but still like very much like centered on, I would say like, kind of bordering on death metal and melodic death metal, but also a fair amount of black metal too.
Yeah, this record is most surely dark. However, it's also fiercely proggy. In fact, way more prog than I expected, and tons of melody. Holy shit. There's constant melody going on in this record. Whether it be lush synths or just simply these awesome guitar melodies, and they're just peppered everywhere.
Great vocal dynamics too. And that was kind of one of the things that initially kicked off the whole, like, wow, this kind of sounds like early OPETH. Because whenever Kyle drops down to do, like, his deep roar, it is very Ockerfeltian. And he's got, like, a great enunciation to it. But he does more than just that. There are clean vocals on here, kind of lightly peppered in. But his other main register is a blackened scream that is solid. Like, it sounds like it crawled out of a tomb in Norway. Howls from Beyond the Mist in particular, that song just has icy cold tremolos all over it. Blast beats. There weren't a lot of blast beats up until this point, and all of a sudden the song comes in just frosty and very just, sinister and dark, but also, again, like bright melodies peppered in and proggy little nuances in between these like cold blackened moments.
Yeah, in fact, the proggy moments in Howls from Beyond the Mist actually are some of my favorite proggy moments on the record. The jam that's in there is super pretty. It has a lot of really nice clean moments to it too, like the cleaner guitar and those really pretty melodies. Once again, I feel like I'm going to say that a lot in this record.
This album definitely has like loads of atmosphere. And I love how it will shift around from, again, like, very evil, very sinister riffs. Pallid in particular. Probably the darkest, meanest, most dissonant song on the album. There are flecks of melody on there, but for the most part, that song just sounds menacing and dark. The dissonant melodies that kick it off and blast beats, like, it sounds like any 100 different dissonant death metal bands that are out there. Like, it just has that wall of sound that kicks in.
It does.
And then it just slams into you with some like heavy kind of like churning grooves and gnarly dark riffs. The vocals are particularly sinister as hell on there. But on the other side, you have like songs that definitely seem more focused on melody, like A Revenant Stillness.
Yeah.
That song has some of the catchiest melodies on the entire album, especially towards the end. Like, they kind of just build on these leads and these like atmospheric, solos and such. And right at the beginning, there's this really cool synthy buildup on it. And how the synth is worked into like the guitar line, it becomes this kind of like layered effect. And the synth is actually kind of prominent, but it's again kind of in the background. It reminded me a lot of Enslaved, which generally if something reminds me of Enslaved, I end up liking it.
And this song too is another good example of those cold screams that Kyle does. They not only lead in the song, but again, they appear towards the end of this proggy jam, and it just really showcases them well.
It's bright and cold at the same time. Like the melodies definitely soar, but they're done in a very like icy cold fashion. And that still isn't everything that this band has to offer. There's elements of just like flat out melodeath on here. A Feast for Worms. It comes in very blackened, but then shifts gears to like, I don't know, like something a little bit more comparable to like Dark Tranquility or At the Gates. Like it kind of has that like faster paced melodeath sound, maybe like Hypocrisy too. And while that song maintains like a very energetic pace, I'd say for a good chunk of it, the end of that song is this just ultra brutal, heavy, almost kind of like doomy end to it. Ed has some of the deepest vocals on the entire album. Like he takes that Ockerfeld, like down a notch and kind of like, I don't know, like sounds like gurgling tar or something like that. It's absolutely just kind of like blood curdling there for a moment.
It's more Bloodbath than it is Opeth.
Yeah, I didn't have an Opeth shirt that was clean, so I went with Bloodbath. One of the main backbones of this album, though, are the frequently layered guitars on here. The guitar work is awesome across the board, both riff-wise, melody-wise, and solo-wise. Like, in fact, there's not a solo on here I didn't like.
The leads are not only wonderful, but they fit each song that they're in really well. Like the mode of each song is complemented by these really, really tasty riffs.
Oh yeah, great phrasing in the leads, but yeah, the thing that I like is the constant layering of melody, especially when it comes down to like some of the tremolo riffs. They don't necessarily always harmonize it, but they'll throw a really cool lead melody that actually kind of changes the vibe on it. A Feast for Worms has a very blackened start to it, but the melodies on top of it kind of give it this more like, I don't know, like a post black metal feel, like Harakiri from the Sky, like something like that. It, sounds bright, but it still sounds very ominous and dark at the same time. And I love that frequent sort of shift on here. Like there's just so many of these like moments that emotionally or maybe like mood-wise kind of collide, but they work as a melody. And that's something I hear in a lot of bands that I would probably compare this band to. Like, I mean, I already said Opeth plenty of times. Yeah. But, I mean, I'd say In Mourning, Amorphous, Disillusion, and maybe just a touch of Ancients. Like, more or less their first two albums, not so much the newest one, but it kind of has that vibe too.
Another cool thing about this album is that most of these songs, there's 9 of them, most of them are fairly long, excluding the brief interlude. So when you say things like proggy, that's what I normally associate with proggy, is bigger, longer songs packed full of dynamics. And one song on here in particular does that really, really well. The title track, Agony's Bespoke, I think is probably one of the greatest songs on this album. Starts out rumbling synths and this beautiful, clean acoustic guitar. And then really, I think it's closer to doom when that riff comes in.
It does kick off with like sort of a dark, haunting melody. Even the acoustic melody sounds more sinister than it does like pleasant. But when that riff settles in, it comes in thunderously. It's heavy, it's dark. I'm gonna compare it to Opeth again. It sounds like Opeth. This is an 11-minute song with a lot of cool transitions, leads, there's synths in it. It's a huge song. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, in terms of this style of music, in terms of writing like huge songs, Opeth is a great comparison here. And I love how this song flows. Like all the transitions are really solid on it. And I love the end of the song because they take one melody and kind of just write it off into the not sunset because this is cold and dark. They write it off into the cemetery fog and it just disappears like a ghost. But no, it's got this like great catchy melody, like this like lead melody that's played on top of this heavily strummed riff. They blast on top of it, settle into a double time rhythm on top of it, getting like kind of a swingy groove on top of it. And they kind of just stick with that throughout the end of the song and kind of just fade out on that one. And I just think that's absolutely fucking killer.
And this record sounds pretty good too, and I guess that can be properly explained by the fact it was produced by the same guy that produced White Ward, and I love White Ward. Pretty crisp production. The guitars have a good crunch to them, yet they're still kind of warm and clean sounding. Drums are compressed a little bit, but you kind of have to do that when you have so much layering going on, I think. The bass is warm. Everything sounds huge. The atmosphere on here is gigantic. The vocals have a good tone to them. I wouldn't say they sit necessarily at a midpoint. They're a little out front, but I think they're right where they need to be.
For me, it's a very even mix, and I like that, this band likes to frequently do like the whole drop out and then build back up, and you can kind of hear each layer come in. and you can just kind of hear where everything sits. And I think everything in here sits in a nice, spot. Like nothing feels too dominant. Like, generally when there are synths, I wonder how far forward in the mix they're going to be. These sit at a nice level and sometimes just like blend in with the music just really well. You can still hear that they're complementing the melody. They're just not trying to like overshadow it.
Because they use a lot of ominous tones, they're not using stuff that's typically out front in a lot of black metal that I've found where they use like strings or they use some like bright tone to further complement tremolos or whatever, blah, blah, blah. These just sit more in the back, and oftentimes they're just kind of droning in the background a little bit, so I think that adds nicely.
Now, while I did really enjoy this, I did have an issue with a couple of songs in here. While I really liked Palette for being flat out the darkest, just bleakest song on this album, it has a vibe that is unmatched on this entire album in terms of just its presence. It's just evil sounding. I do think that it kind of goes on a little bit too long. There is a dropout and sort of like build back up in that one, or at least like a big transition, and then it gets into this monstrously heavy riff towards the end, and it feels like it could end right there. And I feel like it kind of goes on too long with some additional parts where the part where it comes back in feels like it should have been like the big crescendo, like this is the big evil moment where the devil wakes up and shits on your front lawn. I don't know what the devil does. But yeah, it doesn't feel as though like it milks that moment entirely too long. It just feels like there's just too much at the end, like, extra addendums at the end. And in Enmity, while I really like that song, like it's got great proggy textures to it, there's killer leads on it. This was the first one that had clean vocals on it. And they come in at the end and they're kind of like blended with the growls. And the melodies behind it are absolutely fantastic, but the vocals kind of come off as a little bit flat. Not the growls, mind you. The growls sound great. It's just the clean vocals come in and they don't necessarily like come in with a lot of conviction. And that moment in the song, it feels like they're like, yeah, this is like the big end. Let's get some soaring clean vocals on there. Not necessarily like soaring power metal cleans, but like something that's like a little bit bigger. And they didn't necessarily have the biggest impact. And also that was kind of my feel with the clean vocals in general. Well, I think they're good. Like, I think they're well executed. They don't necessarily feel like that necessary.
The clean vocals don't appear much. In fact, they only appear in 3 songs. And I feel like the times when they do appear, it's not altogether necessary for them because of all the other either intense moments or even peaceful moments you have. It doesn't necessarily complement the song well. I'll use Howls from Beyond the Mist as an example. During that proggy part, the music, the instrumentation going on there is so pretty and so beautiful that it doesn't necessarily require clean vocals, I think. In fact, in my personal opinion, if they would have dropped all the vocals and just kept that jam going and then come back in with the harshes, it would have been cool. I think they're good, but I don't think that they're needed in the songs that they appear in.
I also say, like, Nightingale, I didn't necessarily hate it. Like, it is an interlude. But I don't know, I had a question about, like, the noise of that, because I thought there was the sound of, like, the ocean or waves crashing towards the end. And it's a very bright and, just lush-sounding interlude. But the more I listened to it, it sounded like someone dragging a body. So, I don't know, like, there's an interesting contrast there. If it is, I'm not entirely sure. But it definitely wasn't the ocean.
And it does lead into the next song well.
Yeah.
Like it does a good job of opening up Irreverent Stillness, which, again, is a banger of a song.
So, overall, I'm going to give this 3.5 stars. It could actually grow to be a 4, like it's closer to a 4 than it is a 3 for damn sure. This has, again, a lot of stuff that I like about early OPETH, as well as a ton of bands that kind of do this style well. And this style is kind of hard to describe because you could say baseline this is progressive death metal, but again, there's a lot of black metal on here. There's some more like doom-laden moments for sure. I even picked up a couple of thrashy riffs here and there. It's kind of all over the place, but I feel like melodic black metal / progressive melodic death black. I don't know. Like I said, it's a blend of a lot of things, but they do pretty much everything on here really well. There's some solid standouts. Howls from Beyond the Mist and the title track and Irreverent Stillness. Probably my favorite tracks on here. Irreverent Stillness has so many gorgeous melodies.
Yes, it does.
Great grooves on there. And the title track is a proper closer for a progressive whatever album this is. 11 minutes of just nasty riffs and great songwriting and killer transitions. Yeah, I dig this. If you are a big fan of OPETH, Disillusion, OPETH again, In Mourning, Amorphous, Ancients, tons of killer bands, check this out. This was a solid listen.
I'm going to go ahead and give this a solid 4. I really enjoyed it. In fact, there wasn't really a song on this record that I didn't like. Tons of great atmosphere, killer guitar work. The leads in here, I can't stress enough how awesome the leads are. I like all the proggy moments, but then again, I'm a sucker for prog. The drum work is killer. I enjoy the vocal dynamics, even though some of the cleans didn't sit with me. Dude, both those growls and those yells are killer. Very riffy. There's a lot of intricacy in these riffs. I wouldn't call it technical by any means, but just the way at which they're played and used in conjunction with either the tremolos or just the overall mode of the song. Like, they love to do ascending runs that are pretty fucking sweet. Palette is definitely a favorite for me. It is very dark and dissonant. Again, all the things I love. If you know me, you know that I love dark and dissonant death metal. Howls from Beyond the Mist, Irreverent Stillness, Agony's Bespoke, the title track is an absolute beast. I don't know. I just enjoyed this record. I've listened to it a few more times than Nick has, so maybe that's where my upvote comes from. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I will agree, if you're a fan of Opeth, you're probably going to dig this. In Mourning, Proliferation, a little bit of Svartkraun, and Disillusion, because Nick reminded me about Disillusion, and yeah, I can definitely hear that all over this. Anyway, if you're a fan of all those things, and you're a fan of things like mellow death and death metal, and definitely prog and proggy black metal, and who knows where all this sits. If you're a fan of all that, check this out. I'd highly recommend it.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel up in the banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you're looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have t-shirts, both old and new. The old ones are discounted, provided we have your size, and we even have hats, too. So if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below.
And as always, tons of stuff going on at Thralls of Metal. Album reviews, discography rankings, multiple discussion forums. Is it metal? Is it not metal? States of metal, heavy metal, Nick's never-ending collection updates, because why would he stop collecting at this point when there's so much awesome shit? And we talk about all this stuff all for you guys. We appreciate all of our family, our friends, the subscribers. You guys are what make Thralls of Metal pretty awesome, and we appreciate you for it.
Yeah, you guys absolutely roll. Tons of content coming your way, and I will eventually get to some other things besides collection updates. But for now, holy shit, collection updates. This is going to be like a lot of them. I don't have a problem. Anyway, you guys absolutely roll, and we will catch you later.